All right, first I want to talk about core computer services a little bit. We've been supporting small businesses and residential clients since 2003. In addition to computer network support, we offer a variety of other services, including cybersecurity, compliance, web design, creative services, move services, and a lot more. Right now we have over 250 five-star reviews, getting more daily, and our techs are very responsive, professional, practice. As you all know, or as I hope you all know, October is Cybersecurity Month. So this is the month where, as cybersecurity professionals, we'd like to remind everybody that you have a lot of threats out there, and you want to be ready for them. Now, earlier, talking a little bit about cryptocurrency and crypto mining. Anybody who wants to know how crypto mining works, talk to me after. I can give you full definitions on that. As we were talking earlier, you heard us talking about security maintenance, different things throughout the presentation. When it comes to crypto mining, we're going to talk about later, but that requires a lot of computing power. Now, obviously, people can make money off of it because now it's part of the tax code. Wouldn't be there if you could make money off of it. Now, how does this relate to cybersecurity and risk? Well, cyber criminals would rather use your resources than their resources. So there's a lot of malware out there specifically for crypto mining. I want to talk about ways that you keep that out of your network. All that does is slow you down. We're going to talk about risk assessments. Before we get into the risk assessments, let's talk about risk a little bit. Now, when it comes to risk, there's a process for handling it. It's something that happens across every organization. Think about cars. The cars are dangerous when people get into accidents. So we assess, well, why is that dangerous? What happened? People smash into the steering wheel, they smash into the dashboard, into the windshield. So what do? We identify that as a problem. We remediate it. Get seatbelts. Put on all the cars. And what do? We review it. Is this enough? Well, obviously it's not enough because now we also have airbags. It is an ongoing process. We're always looking at the risks and finding ways to resolve them. The same thing happens in the medical world. You go to the doctor, they're going to do blood tests, do a variety of different things to identify, give you medications to remediate it, and then we're going to review it. Same process. In your businesses, dealing with cybersecurity is exactly the same thing. We're going to identify what your risks are, we're going to find ways to remediate them, and then we're going to review them. Big circle. Always want to fence off your risk. Doesn't matter what part of life it's in. You've all heard the term, you can't win if you don't know what the score is. Cybersecurity professionals, this is how we keep score. Right now, we're not winning. You look at some of these numbers, these are the current threats that we're seeing in cybersecurity. In 2020, it was an explosion of activity with malware, ransomware. I'm sure you guys have heard ransomware mentioned a lot of times in the news. We're seeing more targeted attacks. The problem is that the cyber criminals are getting much, much smarter. And as they get smarter, they find new and better ways to do things. A great majority of the attacks that are happening nowadays are automated.
A lot of people who think, well, I'm not important enough to target, or I don't have enough information to target, that's not how they're targeting you. What they're doing is they're looking for vulnerabilities. And once they find the vulnerability, they target the vulnerability. You are just an opportunistic target. That's one of the reasons why getting risk assessments is so vital at this time. Now, 43% of all cyber attacks are targeting small businesses. Why? What is it with small businesses that are that appealing to cyber criminals? Can it be that the information that we have is that valuable? Well, yes, it is very valuable. Every piece of personally identifiable information is has value on the dark web. The whole reason that the cyber criminals are doing this is to make money. Cybersecurity, cyber criminals, hacking, all of this is just a revolving process, and it's all about making money and protecting money. 60% of small businesses that are victims of cyber attack go out of business within 6 months. That's a terrifying number. One of the reasons why it's so important to get a risk assessment. And we've been talking about why small businesses are at risk. Well, why are they at risk? Well, small businesses typically have lax cybersecurity standards. I've been in a variety of different fields, IT fields, throughout my career. I've worked for small businesses. I work for large enterprises. I've worked for nonprofits. I cut my teeth in compliance, working for research labs in military medicine. Learn a lot of compliance very quickly doing that kind of thing. When it comes to small businesses, I see it all the time. Not only are there lax cybersecurity standards, but there's a lot of resistance to put cybersecurity in place. Some of it is because, yes, adding some cybersecurity features is going to cost a little bit of money. But another big thing is people don't like security. It is a long, ongoing process. My wife and I have recently been rewatching MASH episodes. Yeah, that's how old I am. But one of the things that I noticed, Corporal Klinger, always one of my favorites, is in charge of doing night security, doing the patrols. Every single time people approach him, they mock him, refuse to answer security questions. Wait a minute, this guy is supposed to be protecting you, and you don't want to give him the password. You don't want to identify yourself. If he's not paying attention, that puts you all at risk. And yet, that is exactly the attitude that many people take when it comes to cybersecurity. Cyber criminals are opportunistic by nature, as I mentioned before. So, when it comes to these automated attacks, when they find the vulnerabilities, they're going to attack. What kind of vulnerabilities, you might be wondering? Well, Google Chrome has had 12 zero-day, zero-click vulnerabilities this year. What that means, zero-day means it's a vulnerability that exists that there is no patch for. Zero-click means that you do not have to do anything wrong for somebody to take advantage of that vulnerability. If you're not updating your computers consistently, getting the new security features as they come out, then you are at risk for these. Cyber criminals have their bots out searching. It says, oh, look, unpatched Google Chrome. Let's see what we can get from this guy. It's exactly that simple. Here's an example of a breach that I'm sure we've all heard of. Colonial pipeline. This data breach happened because of lax cybersecurity standards. Now, they're not a small business. They're definitely a much larger organization. But the things that happened here are a great example of exactly why a risk assessment is important. They were breached because of a lack of an exit checklist and because they weren't using two-factor authentication. Either one of those very simple steps could have stopped this breach, and then we wouldn't have had people panic buying gasoline on the East Coast. When it comes to cybersecurity, it's not as complex as you think at your level. What you're looking for are ways to mitigate threats. You're looking at ways to keep the cyber criminals from taking that opportunistic attack at you. For this one, it was a VM account that was bought as part of a whole list of usernames and passwords. So whoever was using this account clicked on something that they shouldn't have, revealing their username and password. That was thrown into a list and sold on the dark web. Somebody found it, said, oh, hey, look, we can get in the Colonial pipeline. Let's see if this still works. Type, type, type. Oh, wow, we're in. That easy. Now, a lot of people think, well, if Colonial pipeline was attacked, that was, those cyber criminals who are wearing their hoodies behind their computer, just digging, looking. Nope, completely opportunistic. They found a way in, got in, hacked the system, installed malware, installed ransomware, came out $4 million richer. Now, there are many challenges for small businesses when it comes to cybersecurity. Primarily, a lot of the small businesses don't feel like they should be putting funds into this. Just as we had mentioned earlier, because so many small businesses go out of business when they're breached, security is a very, very important aspect of this to start with. Because the small businesses often work with small teams, they don't really have the people for it. That's where you kind of need to start partnering. That way you get the expertise that you need to secure your systems. And then, of course, that common myth that small businesses don't have the data that cyber criminals want. How many of you know what PII is? Personally identifiable information. It's any type of information that can be used to track or trace an individual. We all have it. Anybody who has employees has it. A lot of people who have clients have it. We have a responsibility to protect it. Now, we have safe harbor laws in Maryland. Most states have them, which give us a little bit of aid, a little bit of assistance when it comes to the rules that are required for us to be safe. Personal identifiable information like social security numbers, names, addresses, telephone numbers, email addresses, all of that stuff, because it has so much value on the dark web, that's the things that they're going after. Those are the things that they're wanting to steal. Now, malware allows people to be able to get this information. Also, data scraping is a way that this information is often obtained. So you may have heard LinkedIn was recently involved in this. Facebook has been involved in it for years. We put a lot of personal information out onto these social networking sites. Cyber criminals go through and they collect all of that data, take that data, put it into a database, and then they start to match it up with other information that gets stolen. And that allows them to come up with new phishing schemes so that they can target individual organizations, which is called spear phishing, or just send out blanket emails looking for different ways to get information, steal credentials, anything that they can do to get more data. The more they get, the more value that has, and they put it out onto the dark web. Not every organization has regulations that they're required to follow. So you've all probably heard of HIPAA. We know what HIPAA is. We have CGIS, we have PCI compliance. There are a lot of different organizations that have very specific regulations when it comes to how you handle your cybersecurity. Because not all organizations have it, doesn't mean that all organizations should not be taking it seriously. When it comes to the cybersecurity, these 5 things are things that every regulatory organization requires, regardless of what it is that they're trying to protect. So your cyber safeguards, making sure that you have antivirus, malware protection, making sure that you have maintenance, everything is updated. Training. Awareness training is one of the key components to stopping malware and phishing attacks. We talk about awareness a lot in cybersecurity circles because the more aware the users are, the easier it is to thwart a lot of these attempts. Phishing emails, how many of you know what a phishing email is? So with a phishing email, essentially it is a cyber criminal that is sending out a blanket email or targeted in the case of spear phishing, where they're trying to get people to click on links, download attachments, go to different websites, and enter in information. It is primarily used for credential phishing, but especially with the use of attachments, they're able to add malware onto the computers, and in doing so, opens them up for threats, vulnerabilities. Some of this malware is able to actually get into the computer, collect data. What it does is looks for very specific file extensions, gathers it all in one location, and then sends it back off. The one little program is able to do all of that. Cyber criminals are getting smart, and they're getting better. Annual risk assessments, one of the things we're talking about. In order to be able to mitigate your risks, you have to know what they are. Third-party agreements, business agreements. This makes sure that everybody that you do business with that has access to your personal information is following the same standards that you are. That way, if there is a breach, and if it comes through one of your third party, then you're able to go back and say, hey, you were supposed to do this, now you're going to be responsible. And then, of course, data breach notification. If there is a data breach, everybody is required by state law to notify anyone who was involved in that breach. That is where the bad press comes in. We've been talking about it here and there, but what exactly is a risk assessment? Well, a risk assessment comprises two components. The first component is taking a risk inventory. The risk inventory is all about determining what systems that you have that contain personal identifiable information and what systems you get into, like web systems, software systems. So you have your hardware, software, those are both very important. Now, roles, also very important when it comes to your risk inventory. Does everybody in your organization have admin rights to their computer? Definitely should not. In fact, no one should be surfing the internet with admin rights on their computer. A terrible idea. You should have a separate admin account and use a user. Because if you click on something wrong and you have an admin account, then that malware has all the rights that it needs to auto-install very often before your antivirus can catch up to it. You always want to be using user accounts. But roles are very important for a lot of reasons. You want to make sure that the correct people have access to the data to add it, modify it, and delete it. Not everybody should have the same level of access. So having roles established helps you to mitigate your threats very well. Identifying what types of personally identifiable information you have, also very important. And then, as we talked about with the business agreements earlier, knowing what vendors have access to it, also very important. Second part of it is the interview. The interview is a process that I go through quite often. I would like to be able to tell you how many of these interviews I've done over my career, but I lost count a long time ago. I primarily have done HIPAA risk assessments in the past, but I've also done a variety of others. With the HIPAA risk assessments, it is the exact same assessment, regardless if it's the Department of Energy, which I spent 2 years working at Forstall in Washington, D.C., doing this kind of stuff, or a two-person organization, all held to the same standards. That is one of the great things about HIPAA, is we have very defined standards that helps you to know exactly where your risks are. All of the risk assessments that are out there, whether it's the NIST risk assessment, whether it's the CJIS, which is for criminal justice system, whether it's your PCI, which is used for your credit card system, no matter what it is, it's all based on that same standards that the HIPAA put in place in order to get your cybersecurity in place. We always want to look at your policies and procedures, roles and responsibilities, talking about roles a little earlier, your technical processes, and then your emergency strategies. So your technical processes are, a lot of them surround how you use your computer. Does your computer have a timeout? When it times out, does the screen lock? If a screen's not locking, you walk away from your computer without locking it, you're leaving your computer at risk. Your emergency strategies, if your systems go down, how do you maintain access or control over those systems? Always a good idea to have emergency strategies in place, not only for disaster recovery, but also if you have a breach. So if you don't have an incident response plan, then how are you going to know, what to do when your systems go down, or what to do when you get breached? When we do the risk assessments, we provide a risk report. The risk reports are also available through the HIPAA risk assessments and a lot of the other ones. However, they tend to be a little bit more complicated. What I like to do is break it down to, hey, this is the risk that we found, and this is what you need to do to fix it. It makes it a lot easier. So as you can see, I just took two very simple ones: insufficient computer maintenance. Why is that a risk? Well, it's a risk because if you're not getting your security updates, then you're going to be vulnerable. And those bots are going to find you. And then the other one is insecure login procedure, two-factor authentication. I am a huge proponent of two-factor authentication. In cybersecurity circles, every cybersecurity expert in the world is going to tell you it is better to use multi-factor authentication than not. Nothing is going to be 100% secure, but this makes you a lot more secure. Stepping back to that Colonial pipeline, if they had two-factor authentication on their accounts, which was available, that would have stopped that breach in progress. Wouldn't have been able to get through. So it's very important to know what your risks are, but the remediation is also, if you're not going to actually take the time and put these things in place, then the risk assessment is going to be meaningless. We did a lot of HIPAA risk assessments for the Frederick Hospital. They had agreements with a lot of different doctors' offices, and it required them to do the assessments. So I'd go out, do the assessment. My first year with Clark, I did 44 assessments. It was, a lot of fun in a 3-month period, sitting down, doing these interviews, breaking it all down. It takes me about 6 hours per in order to get those done. Went out the next year, and 90% of them, I found exactly the same risks. They did nothing to remediate them. Now, none of them had gotten breached during that period, which is great, but just because they didn't get breached at that time doesn't mean they're not going to. We step back to the health analogy. Yeah, we've all heard of that grandparent or whoever that has drank and smoked for their entire life. They eat bacon every day, live to 105 years old. And unfortunately, that's the exception, not the rule. I wish it was the rule, but it's not. So when it comes to risk, it's there. You could be lucky enough not to be hit anytime soon, but with so many risks out there right now, it's not a matter of if you're going to be breached, it's a matter of when you're going to be breached. Get a risk assessment. It's going to help you to mitigate that. All right. Thank you very much.